Extraordinary. It's really strange how young people, just one or two generations removed from, the 20th century, can be so very ignorant of such recent history. However, this narrative is incredibly popular with the secular progressive movement today, whose goal seems to be, removing God from all aspects of life, at least the Christian God. The premise is that society would be far better off without this judgmental God casting shame and guilt down upon human beings and their immoral activities. If we could somehow free ourselves from, the burdensome restraints of this God, our country would be far better off. This idea would be quite laughable if it wasn't so dangerous, because this very movement has already been attempted several times in the last century to devastating, catastrophic results. The 20th century was responsible for more bloodshed and loss of life than all centuries before it combined. Now think about that. Don't just let that statistic fly out the window. Chew that in your mouth for a couple seconds. Why? Why was the last century so dark and filled with so much killing and violence? The answer is simple. For the first time in human history, you had several nations decide to systematically remove God from their culture, to take religion away from the masses, to impose a secular agenda on their population and force them to live a life without devotion to God. The results of this social experiment were horrific, to say the least. I'll name 3 or 4 off the top of my head. Mao Zedong's Red China, Pol Pot's Cambodia, Lenin, Stalin's Soviet Russia, Nazi Germany, and that's just to name a few. Now let's look at some overwhelming statistics of the staggering death and carnage that ensued in these cultures. Nazi Germany, 11 million dead, murdered. Cambodia, 8 million murdered. Red China, 60 million murdered. Soviet Russia, 70 million murdered. Now, I'm not talking, these aren't war injuries, these aren't war deaths. These are populations inside those countries murdered, and those are conservative. All that gore and butchery in one century. Think it couldn't happen here? Think it wouldn't happen here? Think again. For the past 50 years, the Judeo-Christian foundation on which this nation was built has been slowly and methodically chipped away, piece by secular forces masquerading as diplomatic PC progressives. And what's the results? Hate, division, animosity, civil unrest, social strife, bitterness, jealousy, animus, discords of all kinds, racial tensions almost beyond repair, gender conflicts, sexual ambiguities. My oh my, what have we become? Do you see what happens when we remove God from the public sphere? When we attempt to erase the Lord from society's collective conscience? Now, atheists will hear this and think that I'm bashing their way of life, that I'm being unfair and hypercritical of non-believers in general, but this isn't true. Atheists are not to blame, because there is no such thing as an atheist. All non-believers are really just thinly veiled idol worshippers. I say this all the time, but it bears repeating. Human beings are made for one thing: to devote their lives to God. Cry about it all you want, whine about it, it won't change anything. Like fish were made to swim and birds were made to fly. Now, if you choose to reject God, which you can, you will then just make something else God. You will devote your life to something else, or perhaps a multitude of something else's. Pleasure, money, possessions, lust, alcohol, sex, you name it. Okay, anything can fill this void, but it will not work. When governments like the ones I just mentioned want to secularize their population, What they really want is for people to make the government God. They want citizens to devote their lives to the state, or to communism, or to a fascist dictator. But that will never work either. It can't work. It will always end in tragedy. Because no matter how powerful your government is, it's not God. And it will never satisfy the inhabitants of a culture like devotion to the true God is designed to do.